The last step of the screen reclaiming process revolves around degreasing the screen, or essentially removing any chemicals, oils, or dirt that might exist. We must properly prepare the screen so that it can be coated with emulsion and remove any chemical or any ink, anything that might be in that screen must be removed. Now, anytime you purchase brand new screens, they're gonna come in and they're gonna look pretty clean. Realize that they probably have oil and some amount of dirt on them, so anytime you purchase new screens, you need to degrease them. Now, when it comes to degreasing screens, it's a lot like reclaiming, where there's a couple different methods that you can use. What most shops like to do is they're gonna use essentially a chemical called degreaser, and they're going to use a scrub brush, and it's very simple. We're going to spray the mesh. Now, again, remember that your screen must be wet when you're doing this. You don't want to just be throwing dry degreaser on the screen. Typically, we're degreasing screens after they have been reclaimed and essentially all the emulsion's been removed off of there, so they're already wet. Now, I'm going to spray both sides of the screen. Take my scrub brush, and scrub both sides of the screen. Now, this chemical does not take really much any time to do its work. It's more of, again, cleaning and a removing type chemical. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna hit it with our pressure washer, and we're gonna blow out all of that degreaser, and it is extremely important that we don't leave any degreaser in the screen. If degreaser, oils, or dirt of any kind are left in the screen, you're gonna have fish eyes when you go to burn the screen, or when you go to coat the screen, you're gonna see bubbles. There's all types of problems. So that's why degreasing the screen is one of the most important parts of the entire screen printing process, because it's where the screen is gonna start from scratch. And if you don't properly degrease the screen and remove everything from it, you cannot properly do anything else moving forward. So again, we're gonna turn on the power washer. We then need to turn off the power washer and use a hose to make sure we're not pushing any extra chemicals in the corners and so forth back onto the screen mesh. This is called sheening the screen. You want to use the power washer to, again, blow out anything might be within there, but the problem is, again, it can kind of spread chemicals and so forth. By using a hose to kind of finish the whole process, you make sure you're not going to have any chemicals or anything else where you don't want it to be. Now, when I degreased this screen, I did it rather quickly. You need to take your time and make sure that it is 100% clean of anything. Again, sometimes you need to go slowly back and forth and make sure you have a lot of light to diagnose any potential problems. Now, the other way to degrease the screen is to use a chemical called HR6. Now, HR6 is a chemical from Sadi, and Sadi makes pretty much all the darkroom chemicals we suggest you use. For removing the ink from the screen, they have the IR26, it stands for ink remover. Then you have the ER2, which is the emulsion remover, and we can use that in the dip tank or straight out of the bottle and spray onto the screen. And then the last step of degreasing, we don't actually like to use a traditional degreaser. And the reason being is sometimes on a screen, you will see a slight haze from the previous print job. Now, there is a difference between a haze and leftover ink. Now, leftover ink, you want to use that IR26 ink remover to remove it, but sometimes, again, you have that haze from just a long print run, and you typically have to use something called haze remover. Now, haze remover traditionally is essentially battery acid. It is a very strong chemical and one that we don't really like to use in our shop. What we prefer to use is something called HR6 from Sadi, and essentially it's a haze remover that can be used as a degreaser. And again, it's a little bit of a different process, but we promise that it is the best way to degrease the screen. And again, this is the most important part of the entire process, because if we don't start with a great screen, then we can't guarantee anything else moving forward. So when it comes to HR6, you're going to need to always mix it up. So essentially, I've just got a stirring stick. I'm going to give it a quick stir. Again, it's not a liquid. It's kind of a goop. It's essentially a soap. And it's really not that hard on your hands. Now, I should be using gloves, but again, this chemical compared to a traditional HR6 or degreaser is much easier to work with. Now, all I do is I'm going to take my brush and I dip it in there, and I just get a little bit of amount of HR6 on here, and I'm just going to rub it on both sides of the screen. Now realize we have mesh. The mesh is going to naturally allow some of the chemical to work its way onto the other side. So you don't want to put too much degreaser on here, because then you can kind of have some problems. And you could sometimes see a little dark little spot where you've kind of had a deposit of it, and you can grab it and again, scrub it where needed. Now, what's different about using the HR26 haze remover as a degreaser is we must now let this degreaser completely dry. Essentially, and it makes a lot of sense, by letting it dry, it's going to be able to grab anything that's on it, and then once it's completely dry, and that only takes around 10-20 minutes if you have it in front of a fan or you're using a screen drying cabinet, you're then ready to bring it Again, I am degreasing this screen kind of quickly. You want to take your time to make sure you're removing every little thing that potentially could be in it and can cause problems when we go to coat it, burn it, and then we're on press. Again, you can see the degreasing process is not terribly difficult. And out of all the three steps, it's probably the less dirtiest, but it's the most important, because if you don't properly degrease the screen, the entire screen printing process is going to have problems at some point. If you have any questions on how to degrease a screen, please do not hesitate contacting us. Thank you.